All right. So, Ryan, where are you from?
I'm from, I grew up in Spokane, Washington, and then I moved to Seattle when I was 15.
I see. And
The Northwest.
Awesome. And where are your parents from?
Oh, man. My dad grew up in Yakima, Washington, and my mom grew up in Wenatchee, but she actually had her early childhood on the Marshall Islands.
I see.
Which are out by, I think, like Samoa or something.
Sweet.
Like a 1 mile.
It's very
island.
storied.
Yeah.
What was your father's profession?
He, for the most part, worked in nonprofit. He's Christian, so he worked in ministry, but he worked for an organization called Young Life for 25 years. And then he bounced between a few other nonprofits. He went over to International Justice Mission, which was really different from what he was doing. You know, it works with illegal land seizure, child prostitution, slave trafficking, stuff like that. And then he kind of came back and has worked for a few other people. His specialty would be kind of large-scale fundraising, raising money for big projects surrounding nonprofit.
Right. I see. And what was your mother's profession?
My mom, early on, was a teacher. She taught biology, and then she got infected with HIV 4 years before I was born. And then she that shifted her path a little bit. She worked for the AIDS community in Spokane. I mean, speaking at high schools, a lot of volunteer stuff. Now she's worked for a couple different people in the last few years. She's also worked in the lane of nonprofit. So World Vision and Construction for Change has been kind of the most recent thing that she's been working for.
Cool.
Yeah.
And do you have any siblings?
I have 2 older sisters. I'm the youngest.
I see. And were you a well-behaved kid?
No. I wasn't a non-well-behaved kid. I was your classic youngest. I mean, when you're the youngest of 3, your parents are worn out. It's like you're the first 2 siblings broke them down, and so the idea of, like, you know,
they got their
of a hard curfew and rated R movies, like, there's just way more leniency, I think, for a youngest. And then you also have 2 older siblings, so you're used to being around, I think, older kids. In my case, you know, a sister who's 2 years older and a sister who's 4 years older. So I was a hyperactive kid. I was energetic, running around. I wasn't, you know, aiming for trouble, but at the same time, I wasn't a straight-edge kid.
I see. And how did you get into rap music?
You know, I think that my first introduction to rap hip-hop would have been in late, mid-elementary school with just classics. I mean, I was from a small town, so you know, Tupac, I remember I had Masterpiece, Ghetto Dope, and the Crazy Orange, No Limit Records would sing that they would do. And then, you know, that kind of carried into middle school. Then I got out of that into other genres and circled back when I was maybe 16 and got into it on a different level.
Sweet. Were your parents pleased when you first got into rap?
I think I was young. I think that you know, parents come from a generation where cussing is it's something different than for our generation. Those words, you know, adjectives, descriptive words that I think have been so desensitized for us. For me, I'm somebody who cusses often.
Same.
You know, yeah, they're like any other words with maybe just a slight more emphasis. I think for our parents growing up, those words were reserved. They were reserved for really driving home a point. Like I remember my dad would only drop an F-bomb or whatever when he was trying to kind of scare me a little bit or let me know that he was upset.
Yeah, so they don't sound like they'd be too
So I think when I was young, my parents were never, you know, even growing up in a Christian household, fairly liberal parents. They were never like, don't do this, don't do that. This is, you know, this is the right art. This is the wrong art. But I do think that my dad was not the biggest fan of just the language you know, when you're 11, 12, 13 years old. By the time I'm 15, 16, I'm doing whatever. And that has also never been, even back then, with whatever music I was doing or things I was pursuing, that would never be a barrier for them to be involved or to be supportive. So
you never had to work
so
around
yes
them,
and
eh?
no. Well, I mean, I had my dad cracking parental advisory CDs, but it wasn't like because it was hip hop or
Right.
rap. It was like this is a little beyond what, you know, I as a dad or a mom should be letting my kids. But I remember he took my Walkman when I was like 11 or 12, and I had DMX's "Flesh of My Flesh" or whatever. I mean, the album cover where he's soaked in blood, and my dad put it on. He was just, and I walked in, and I was like, oh fuck.
This is gonna be interesting.
Yeah, and you know, he wasn't a fan, but
Right.
but he was also so interested in art and in what I liked artistically that it's like, you know, I could put it. It shifted quickly to me listening to those records with him and describing, you know, back then what I thought was cool, or telling him what I knew about the artist or whatever. And I think that changes the lens a little bit as to why a kid likes something.
I see. So, you know, a wise man once wrote that if you look back into your life, you know, around the time you were 10 to 13, right? You know, looking at the activities that you were up to in your spare time, you can sort of identify your true passions, the things that you're really, you know, interested in, right? So, you know, I'm guessing that music would have been one of the activities.
Yeah.
But what were the other ones?
Well, guitar. Guitar was my thing. I mean, if you would have asked me when I was 10 to 13, you know, even if you're going to be a musician, like, what do you want to do? Like, I was in a band.
Right.
And I was very devout to that. And I was constantly playing guitar. Outside of that, I felt an obligation to play sports in terms of other kind of curricular type of stuff. And that wasn't from, like, my parents at all. It was from my community, being in a small town, being, you know, at a school that would have been known more for sports and jocks and stuff like that prior to moving to Seattle. That it was like I was not passionate about sports, but I played football. And then on the art side, you know, I would go to shows. I was really into computers. I built a website when I was 12.
Nice.
I was slowly getting into
HTML.
graphic design. Yeah, learning HTML.
GeoCities?
Yes. Exactly.
I got you. I love those GeoCities websites.
Yeah.
I was so sad when it got shut down.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
I remember I made you know, I didn't make it, but I designed basically a message board for my middle school that became kind of like the hotbed of people just talking shit. And I felt so powerful. Then I had to shut it down. But, you know, I think we came up in what I don't think we fully recognize to be one of the most technological telecommunications transformative eras in history. No question. And we're still in that. But, you know, I think for myself, right on the verge of these different things, social media being introduced, where you have that part of your life where you had memorized all of your friends' phone numbers, you were ringing doorbells, you were walking down the street, and then you have now this part of your life making your first MySpace page or Facebook page or whatever. And it is, you know, odd to think of a 12-year-old now that would be born into the world and know no difference.
Right, exactly. They don't know the analog back in the day.
Yeah, that social media has always been there. That form of communication, your friends' community, always revolves in this bubble.
I see.
So I do think I'm privileged to kind of be right on that tipping point of a lot of changes. You know, not having a cell phone until I was 15.